My mother booked me an office here for life, and situations like this small story are fairly familiar to me. This is just content for the sake of views. It's about real experiences, about how things are. It's important to me that you recognize yourself in this and not repeat other people's mistakes. All names, titles, and others are fictional, of course.
Rick's face was beet red as he slammed the conference room door so hard the glass rattled. You're joking, right? You're actually leaving? My resignation letter sat between us like a live grenade with the pin halfway out. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I just folded my hands in my lap and said, "Best of luck." He stared at me like I'd just confessed to arson. See, the thing about men like Rick is they count on your silence, your reliability, your invisibility. They never prepare for the moment the quiet one walks. Let me pause for 1 second. If this story resonates already, if you've ever been promised something and watched it vanish in someone else's handshake, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps the team bring you more of these stories, and 97% of you forget to. Don't be part of the 97%. Now back to the chaos. Rick wasn't the beginning of this story. Not really. He was just the loudest symptom of a deeper disease, one I'd spent years learning how to navigate without catching it. When I joined Darnell Systems, I didn't come in with flash. I didn't need it. While the other project leads were busy writing LinkedIn posts about synergy and disrupting workflows, I was the one cleaning up their messes in silence. When the European compliance bridge went off the rails in Q2, it was me who reverse engineered the broken API logic and pushed a fix at 2:40 a.m. with no credit and no fanfare. When the CFO begged us to pivot to a cloud-native architecture to appease the board, I mapped the migration paths and phased our legacy dependencies down to 0 without downtime. They started calling me the architect because nothing moved unless I touched it, and I didn't mind. At first, I liked the calm of building things that lasted. I liked knowing I could hold chaos at bay without needing a megaphone or a title. But you do that long enough, and something happens. The same people who once said, "You saved our necks," start saying, "You're just operations." The ones who used to pull you into last-minute war rooms start sending your invites to interns for coverage. And the worst part? They do it with a smile, like you should be proud to be the scaffolding they climb past. Rick wasn't always like that. Back when he was just my direct manager, he'd stop by my desk and say things like, "I don't know how you keep it all together, but thank God you do." Then came his VP promotion. And slowly, the gratitude shriveled into expectation. Every quarter, it was more ask, less thank. He'd swing by and bark things like, "Finance needs those roll-up projections revised by 6," without a greeting. I didn't complain. I just kept receipts. Every project, every deliverable, every last-minute change he pushed through and asked me to just cover it. Not for revenge, not at first. Just for clarity, for insurance. Because I'd watched too many women like me get swallowed up by their own competence. No title bumps, no bonus structure, no credit. Just, "Thanks, you're a lifesaver," until the next crisis. I kept a folder. Timestamps, email chains, screenshots of task handoffs with his initials on the approval line. And when the big one hit, the 12.4 Mbit migration project that no one wanted to touch, I took it. They said it was doomed. 3 systems, 2 time zones, and a hostile client with their own in-house CTO breathing down our necks. I said yes, quietly. 6 months later, I handed Rick the final report. On time. Under budget. His handshake was sweaty. His eyes didn't meet mine. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," he muttered. "Promotion's in motion. Just be patient." I nodded. I already knew better, because by then I'd finally learned the rule no one writes down in the handbook. If they think you'll stay no matter what, they'll give you exactly that. Nothing. I didn't even hear about the promotion from Rick. I heard it from Natalie in HR, who leaned across the coffee station one morning with a careful smile and said, "Congrats to your new boss, I guess." I blinked. New boss? She tilted her head. "Oh, Rick didn't tell you? They just pushed the senior director announcement to Slack. Thought you'd be looped in." I opened my laptop right there in the break room, fingers stiff. The banner across the top of the company comms channel read, "Excited to welcome John White as our new Senior Director of Ops." John. 6 months ago, he was a consultant with a shiny slide deck and a habit of explaining things to me I'd built from scratch. John, who called AWS the cloud thing in a budget call and thought Agile was a personality type. John, who played golf with Rick every other Sunday and once told me in a planning meeting, "Let's not get into the weeds. You've got this, right?" before cutting out early for school pickup. My hands didn't shake. I just minimized the tab and walked back to my desk. HR sent the official email later that afternoon. I read it 3 times. No mention of the migration. No thank you for the foundational systems I'd built. Just, "John brings a fresh perspective to our operational strategy. Please welcome him into this leadership role." Rick didn't even call, but 2 days later, he stopped by my desk with a paper coffee cup and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, don't take it personally," he said, nudging the cup toward me. "This wasn't a slight. It's about optics. John's got external experience. Makes the board feel good." I stared at the cup. "Did they see the migration numbers?" He waved it off. Sure, but this decision was already in motion. These things move fast." Then came the phrase I'll never forget. "You're essential, no matter your title. Promotions don't define impact." And that's when I knew. He never intended to follow through. I went home that night and pulled up my contract. I keep everything, especially performance clauses. Appendix B, Section 4, delivery of Tier 1 projects under budget and within scope shall trigger automatic eligibility review for advancement consideration within 2 review cycles. It was there, in writing, with Rick's signature and timestamp. I searched my email for the keyword promotion. 3 hits. One of them, dated 7 months ago, said, "We'll circle back after migration wraps. You're the obvious pick." The next, from 4 months ago, "We're aligned on your track, just waiting on final budget sign-off." And then the last one, "Finish strong and this is yours." I looked at the delivery report. Under budget by $440,000, client satisfaction score 98%, average resolution time for the integration glitches under 2.7 hours. Every metric hit, every box checked. I thought I'd feel angry, but it was worse than that. I felt small, because deep down I'd believed him. Believed that the work would speak louder than proximity to power. That results would override happy hour politics and country club ties. I'd played the long game. I'd stayed late, covered gaps, mentored interns, shielded teams from Rick's knee-jerk pivots. And when it mattered, when it really mattered, I was just skipped. No explanation, no conversation, just a pat on the head and a new name on the org chart. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it John White Transition. And then I opened another one, Rick Contractual. If they weren't going to keep their promises, I was going to keep my records. Every timestamp, every deliverable, every clause. Because the one thing Rick didn't realize is that when you keep receipts for 9 years, you don't need a title to make an impact. You just need the moment when the house of cards wobbles. And I had a front row seat. I didn't sleep much that Sunday night. Not because I was second-guessing anything, but because I was going over my checklist one last time. My backup logs, my compliance thread exports. A few key screenshots with Rick's initials on change orders he once begged me not to run through procurement. Everything was neat, quiet, and airtight. My resignation wasn't some dramatic letter packed with rage or philosophy, just clean lines, bullet points, effective immediately, vacation days to be paid out. Thank you for the opportunities. Wishing the company continued success. No bitterness, just facts, like everything I'd ever done for them. By 8:05 Monday morning, I was standing in the doorway of Rick's office while he stirred powdered creamer into his mug like it owed him rent. I handed him the envelope. "Appreciate the years of opportunity," I said simply. "Wishing you continued success." He squinted. "What's this?" I didn't elaborate. I just stood there while he opened it and scanned the page. At first, he looked confused. Then something shifted behind his eyes. Panic, disbelief, maybe the dawning realization that he'd misjudged the one person who never made a fuss. "You're serious?" he said, his voice too loud for that hour of the morning. I nodded once. "I've tied off all loose ends. The project dependencies are mapped. Team handoffs documented. You'll find links to everything in the internal tracker." He blinked. "Hold on. This isn't how we do this. I mean, we haven't even had a conversation about your future here." "You're right," I said. "We haven't." He stood up like that was supposed to intimidate me. "Can we sit down? Can we talk?" "There's not much left to say." and I turned. Halfway out the door, I heard him scrambling, papers rustling, drawer slamming, the unmistakable fumbling of a man reaching for a phone he never expected to need. He didn't call my name. He called someone else's. That told me everything. I walked past Natalie from HR on my way out. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Smart woman. By the time I reached my desk, my team lead was already hovering near my chair. "Are you okay?" she whispered, like I'd been hit by a truck instead of choosing to get out of its way. I just smiled and started powering down my laptop. "It's not like they didn't see this coming," I said quietly. "They just didn't believe I'd actually do it." I packed slowly. I wasn't rushing. Let them feel the silence. Around 10:12 a.m., a meeting invite hit my inbox titled Resignation Follow-Up. I declined it without opening, and then I archived my account. Logged out. By 10:45, I was in my car, and Rick had left 5 missed calls. Funny. He used to let my emails sit unread for 3 days. Now suddenly, he couldn't get through a Monday without me. I pulled out of the lot and didn't look back, because the thing about people like Rick, they only notice absence when it costs them something, and they never realize the damage they've done until the one holding the glue finally puts it down. By the time I got home and kicked off my shoes, my inbox was still pinging, even though I was technically no longer an employee. I'd locked out of Slack, archived my Darnell credentials, but some things still filtered through, like a ghost in the machine. Around 2:56 p.m., a notification popped up on my personal Gmail. The subject line made me laugh out loud. Request for clarification, performance track documentation, urgent. Legal had reached out to HR. Someone must have finally asked the question that should have been asked weeks ago. Did we have a documented promotion path for her? The answer? Silence. And not the kind of silence that buys time. The kind that smells like liability. From what I gathered later, they scrambled. Rick's assistant was tasked with digging through project archives, and that's when things started to go south. For them, anyway. Turns out, my name wasn't just peppered through the documentation. It was tattooed across it. Risk mitigation plans? Authored and signed by me, countersigned by Rick. Deployment dependencies? Mapped, time-stamped, and tested by me. Vendor handoffs, client escalation pathways, rollback protocols, all me. Every single final report tied to the 12.4 malware migration bore my initials, my account ID, and in several cases, congratulatory comments from executives that now looked more like smoking guns. Worse, someone, probably Natalie, had quietly attached my resignation letter to the compliance board's monthly queue. It was protocol. She was doing her job. But that little PDF with 3 paragraphs and my neat bullet points started a domino effect nobody saw coming. At 3:12 p.m., I got a text from Natalie herself. Rick's in full damage control mode. Legal just looped in compliance. Everyone's asking why we let you walk. And then a follow-up. He's saying he thought you'd circle back before finalizing. Circle back? I stared at those words like they were in another language. I wasn't a boomerang. I wasn't an unpaid intern. I was the person who kept his projects from becoming class action lawsuits. And he thought I'd just orbit back like a satellite waiting for permission to shine. They held an emergency meeting that afternoon. I wasn't there, obviously, but my former team lead called me that evening, voice low like she was talking to someone in witness protection. "They're pulling every document with your name on it. Rick's sweating bullets. CFO asked why no one flagged the retention clause in your contract." "Because Rick didn't think I'd use it," I replied. "And now?" "Now he's realizing I read the fine print." She paused. "Did you know this would happen?" I didn't answer her. Not directly. Because the truth was, yeah, I did. I'd seen this play out before. Not just to me, to other women, quieter ones who held entire departments together while the title holders took credit and skipped the accountability meetings. They always act like you're replaceable until you actually leave. Then suddenly, you were the translator for half their vendors. The only one who understood why finance couldn't sync with ops without crashing the system. The person who fixed things at 1:40 a.m. without calling a meeting about it. They'd built the entire machine around me and didn't even realize it. Now they were pulling at every wire, trying to understand why the lights had dimmed, and all they were finding were receipts. Digital ones, paper ones, emails, audit trails, Slack pings with Rick's, "Can you just patch this?" notes, and tucked neatly inside my 2019 retention folder, a clause they'd forgotten, but I hadn't. Because I never built systems that depended on trust. I built systems that exposed the moment trust was broken. By Tuesday morning, they'd shifted from silence to spin. HR phrased it delicately. There appears to be some ambiguity around whether your recent project completion met the formal advancement cycle criteria. Ambiguity. Cute. That's corporate speak for, we're hoping you don't remember your own work as well as we remember screwing you. But I did remember. I remembered everything. The milestone tracker I'd maintained for the last 14 months wasn't some afterthought. It was a fortress. Every delivery checkpoint, every risk approval, every internal review had its own RAW, its own timestamp, its own hyperlink to the signed-off documentation. And not one of them was late. Rick himself had initialed 12 of the 17 project checkpoints. I had the screenshots to prove it, him typing good to go at 11:03 p.m. on a Saturday during the launch window. His little thumbs up emoji next to a cost-saving workaround I'd implemented when our vendor flaked on API delivery. I pulled up the final wrap-up deck I'd emailed to the exec team after the migration was complete. The CFO had replied directly, CCing Rick and the board chair. One line. Legendary work. Hope the org knows what it has. Guess not. They'd tried to erase my name from the credit, but the audit trail wouldn't let them. SharePoint logs showed I was the original author on every doc John White had copy-pasted into his onboarding brief. Even the permission history showed I'd granted Rick read-only access to the final build maps. Their attempt to frame it like I hadn't technically completed enough cycles to qualify for promotion wasn't just false, it was laughably off. I had full completion on a Tier 1 deployment ahead of schedule, under budget, and with no critical outages. According to our own internal rubric, one I'd helped draft, by the way, that was gold standard for triggering review, and I had the receipts. Even the pre-launch audit checklist, which legal liked to pretend didn't matter, was 100% cleared. I'd made sure of it. Because I knew this would happen, I knew that if things went too well, they'd find a way to either dilute the credit or dangle the carrot. So I documented like I was writing case law. Each deliverable signed, each escalation de-escalated, even the interdepartmental conflicts I smoothed over, documented, with timestamps, approvals, and thank you emails that aged like vintage explosives. HR had no idea how to respond when I forwarded them a zip folder titled Project Milestones Confirmed. Inside, PDF exports of every tracker, Slack message exports, meeting recordings, approvals with timestamps, version histories, even metadata showing I created the framework Rick had insisted we collectively built. I didn't hear back for 6 hours. Then came the legal CC. We are reviewing the supporting materials and appreciate your thoroughness. That's lawyer speak for we stepped on a landmine. And still, Rick tried to contain the fallout. He called me from his personal phone. Left a voicemail with a syrupy tone like I might have just been confused by the process. Let's talk through this, all right? We're all on the same team. Sure, Rick. That's why you gave my seat to your buddy and then gaslit me with a latte. I texted him back a single sentence. All materials shared with legal, HR, and compliance. See audit thread. That was the moment it clicked for him. This wasn't just a resignation. This was the part where the receipts started talking louder than the man who tried to bury them. It was almost laughable how simple it was. While Rick scrambled to retroactively redefine what promotion eligibility meant and HR tried to repackage their oversight as a miscommunication, I opened a Dropbox folder labeled 2019 Retention Final. I hadn't looked at it in over 2 years, but I knew exactly what was in there. I'd saved it the day they tried to make me whole after the Vancouver disaster. Back then, our Western region rollout had collapsed under a mess of untested integrations and a contractor who ghosted 3 days before launch. It was Rick who called me late on a Friday, practically whispering into the phone, "I need you to fix this." Quietly. I did. Spent my anniversary weekend rewriting code while their senior architect played golf. I stabilized the region in 10 days. The following Monday, they handed me a retention package to make me feel appreciated. The usual stuff, meager bonus, vague promises, but one thing stood out, a clause. Clause 9C. I remembered flagging it at the time and asking Rick about it. His exact words were, "Just a little backstop in case we ever screw this up." He laughed when he said it, but I didn't. I'd had legal clarify the wording and then pushed for a time-stamped, countersigned copy. HR reluctantly obliged. There it sat, buried 3 pages into the agreement. In lieu of promotion, employee may elect voluntary departure and receive all compensation as though promoted and involuntarily terminated, including but not limited to full annual bonus acceleration, extension of stock vesting schedule for 2 years, and continuation of benefits at promoted tier rate for no less than 12 months. Rick's signature sat just below it, clear, confident, probably high on adrenaline after not losing his job over the Vancouver mess. And there was the timestamp. HR approval, legal approval, all sitting in my folder. They hadn't just overlooked my promotion. They'd activated my parachute. The clause wasn't just a consolation prize, it was a trigger. And their decision to skip me for optics had made it live. They thought they were sidelining me. What they'd actually done was hand me a golden ticket. No title? Fine. I didn't need a title to invoke the very clause Rick himself had once said was, just in case. I stared at the document for a long time, rereading every word. It was all there. They couldn't redact it. They couldn't walk it back. It had been ratified, logged, and, most importantly, triggered by their own inaction. And I could already hear the board's reaction when legal had to explain how a forgotten clause from 4 years ago was about to cost the company a 6-figure payout. Because someone wanted to play promotion politics with a golf buddy. I sat back, took a breath, and cracked my knuckles. Let them dig. Let them spin. Let them rewrite Slack history and redefine eligibility all they want. Because while they were playing short-term optics, I'd been playing long-term chess. And they'd just landed their king squarely in check. I didn't write the email with emotion. I wrote it the same way I'd written deployment documentation for 7 years. Precise, thorough, unflinching. Subject: Clause execution. Rick Fulton. Body: to HR and legal per clause 9C in my 2019 retention agreement, signed by Rick Fulton and timestamped by HR on October 4th, 2019. I am formally invoking promotional separation benefits as outlined. Attached: signed retention clause, PDF, finalized project closeout report for Q1, Q3 PDF, screenshots of internal acknowledgements from CFO and VP Ops, PNG Slack message export, XIP SharePoint version logs. Verifying authorship, PDF per clause terms, I am entitled to full bonus acceleration at senior director rate, 2-year RSU vesting, 12 months of continued benefits at promoted tier value. I appreciate your timely review and processing. Best. C. I sat there for a few seconds after clicking send, staring at the blinking cursor like it might flinch. It didn't. Less than an hour later, the read receipt pinged. First legal, then HR, then, interestingly, Rick, the same man who once told me, "You don't need to worry about the small print. That's just filler." Turns out, it wasn't filler. It was leverage, cold and binding. 2 hours and 41 minutes later, I got the reply from legal. We acknowledge the validity of your claim under Clause 9C. Your eligibility for promotional separation benefits is confirmed. Processing is underway. HR will be in contact with final disbursement details. Translation: we stepped on our own landmine and you just handed us the detonation log. They didn't even try to call me. No, let's talk. No offer to undo the damage, no promises to make it right, because they knew. The moment they saw the clause, they knew this wasn't a bluff. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't vengeance. It was a calculated invocation of a contract they drafted, signed, and shelved, thinking I'd never read it. I did. Twice. Rick didn't respond directly, but a little bird from finance forwarded me a Slack message he'd accidentally dropped into the wrong channel. It read, "She actually kept the clause? Jesus. Why the hell did I ever sign that?" The reply: "Because she saved your ass in 19. You just forgot." I leaned back in my chair and closed the thread. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even smug. I was just done. They'd tried to play a loyalty game with someone who'd built the rules engine, and all it took to win was showing them their own words. Dated, stamped, and enforceable. That was the moment I stopped being the architect and became the reckoning. 2 weeks later, John White resigned. No press release, no handoff email, just a quiet line added to the org chart update that Friday. Position vacated, interim leadership TBD. And just like that, the man Rick had picked to leapfrog me vanished into LinkedIn silence. Apparently, John hadn't expected actual complexity. He thought systems integration meant drag and drop dashboards and a few Jira tickets. He hadn't touched the legacy dependency map I'd built. Hell, he didn't even know it existed. According to someone still on the inside, he had walked into the weekly client sync and fumbled for 10 minutes trying to explain why the finance module hadn't reconciled across the shared ledger. The client had asked a simple question, something like, which middleware process handles conditional overrides on failover? And John just blinked. I know, because I wrote that middleware process. I had patched it at 1:43 a.m. one night in March after their European partner corrupted the fallback logic with a rogue deployment. John never even knew it was there, and when systems broke, Rick had no one left to call. That Monday, I got an email from Darnell's External Relations Liaison, a title they'd just made up. The message was clean and polite. We're exploring options for short-term consulting to assist with continuity and stability as we recalibrate project ownership. Your expertise would be invaluable. Would you be open to a brief call to discuss scope and availability? I read it once, then twice. Then I forwarded it to my personal email and deleted the original from my archive. No response, no negotiation, because I wasn't going back. Instead, I took a different call, this one from the CFO of the client I'd migrated so flawlessly. We'd love to bring you onto our advisory board, he said. Not full-time, just high-level architectural oversight, quarterly input, remote, discreet. And well compensated, of course. I accepted. By Thursday, I had a login to their systems and a seat at the next roadmap meeting, this time on the side that cut the checks. Darnell's name was on the agenda, right below Risk Review Vendor Reliability. The next steering committee meeting was virtual. I joined from my sunroom with coffee and a muted mic. Rick never joined. Instead, they sent a junior PM to read a status update that was clearly written 5 minutes before the call. No one asked follow-ups. No one even looked up. The seat Rick used to occupy on those calls, the one where he'd say things like, "Our team's in complete control," was now a digital placeholder labeled unavailable. It was poetic, really. They hadn't just lost a manager. They'd lost the interpreter, the one who translated chaos into deliverables, who untangled executive spin from actual metrics, who made Rick look like he understood systems when all he really understood was delegation and tea times. Now, there was no one to buffer him from the consequences. I sat through the rest of the meeting in silence, camera off, sipping my coffee. No one mentioned me, but my documentation was still on their shared drive. My process maps still defined their week, and somewhere inside that broken org chart was a permanent blank space, a role Rick tried to fill with proximity instead of competence. He didn't just lose me, he lost the illusion that I was ever replaceable. The report came out on a Thursday. I didn't even know it had dropped until my phone buzzed 3 times in a row while I was on the porch, watching a storm roll in over the lake. A friend from finance, one of the few who hadn't treated my departure like a gossip opportunity, sent me a screenshot with no subject line. Just the text. Thought you'd want to see this. It was a redacted internal audit summary, Q4 operational review, marked confidential. But someone had leaked it, probably out of guilt, or fear, or both. Buried on page 9, under a section blandly labeled Operational Disruptions, was the line that made me laugh out loud. Key personnel departure triggered clause-based equity acceleration. Oversight acknowledged. That was it. No name, no elaboration, no apology. But I didn't need the footnotes. I was the disruption. They hadn't just underestimated me, they'd activated a financial landmine they wrote themselves. And in trying to deny me a promotion, they'd handed me every benefit they were trying to withhold, plus a few extra zeros they weren't planning on parting with. Another text came in 5 minutes later. Same friend. 740K total impact. RSUs, bonus, legal fees, benefits rollover, Rick's under review, board's not happy. I stared at the message for a second. The kind of silence that settles on you when the end of something feels clean. Not sweet, not triumphant. Just final. I didn't reply right away. I poured another cup of coffee and watched the sky go from gunmetal gray to deep charcoal, the kind of color you can feel in your lungs. When I finally responded, I kept it short. wishing them continued success. Because what else was there to say? Rick had played short-term power games with long-term contracts. He thought titles equaled control, that signing something and forgetting it made him untouchable. But contracts don't forget. Clauses don't care about golf games or optics or boardroom politics. They activate. They execute. And when they do, no one asks who smiled in the holiday photo. They ask who signed the dotted line and who kept the receipt. I didn't call anyone, didn't post a cryptic message on LinkedIn. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew. The ones who didn't? They were the reason the system broke in the first place. Somewhere, in some beige conference room, Rick was probably pointing at pie charts and trying to blame unforeseen variables. But the truth was simple. They promised something, then broke it. And in doing so, they triggered a cost they thought they'd buried. That's the thing about quiet professionals. We may not shout, but when we leave, the silence is measurable. And in this case, exactly $740,000 worth.